Why is her photo here? Maya's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the framed picture on the CEO's desk. It was her mother, but that couldn't be. This was the CEO's office, not a place for memories. Her heart pounded as she stepped forward, her voice trembling. That's my mother. Why is she here? The room went silent. The CEO's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. Maya felt the weight of his gaze, the danger of her question hanging in the air. She knew this could cost her everything, her job, her dignity, but she couldn't walk away without answers. Not when the truth was this close. Without realizing it, she was about to expose a secret that could shatter everything. She took a breath. Tell me, she whispered. The CEO looked at her, and the room held its breath. Maya's fingers curled around the edge of the desk, her eyes still fixed on the photo. She could feel the cold air around her, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the low murmur of voices just beyond the office door. Her body tensed, every muscle tight, but she kept her posture straight, dignified. The life she lived had taught her how to be invisible when needed, how to blend into the background of a world that didn't notice her. It was easier that way, easier to slip through unnoticed. She wiped her palms on her skirt, the fabric worn thin from countless washings. She had no choice but to wear it, no money for new clothes, no time for luxuries. The small studio apartment she lived in barely had space for the furniture, let alone room for her hopes. The rent was always a struggle, but somehow, she made it work. Barely. Her mother used to tell her that people would always look down on her, on them, but it was how she carried herself that would make the difference. Maya never forgot those words. They stayed with her, a quiet reminder that her worth wasn't tied to the clothes she wore or the paycheck she brought home. It was her mind, her ability to stay steady, to never let the weight of the world crush her spirit. But as she stood in this polished office, under the unforgiving glare of a man who didn't even remember her mother, a tiny voice inside her whispered that maybe her mother had been wrong. Maybe dignity wasn't enough. Maybe. Her heart hammered against her chest as the CEO's silence stretched on. It was a game, she knew. He was testing her, seeing how far she'd go. Would she back down? Would she accept the invisible place she was given? A place that cost her pride but saved her job? Her eyes flicked to the door. If she left now, she'd be one more nameless face to him. One more worker, no matter how many years she'd given this company. But she couldn't. She just couldn't. Not now. Not when she was so close to the truth. She shifted her weight, the cold of the floor seeping into her shoes, and took a step back. That's my mother, she said again, this time more firmly, her voice steady, but just below the surface, there was a tremor. She built this company. She's the reason you're sitting here. The CEO blinked. His eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite place, but it was enough to keep her standing tall. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not today. She swallowed, forcing herself not to flinch when he didn't respond right away. Maya was used to silence, but this felt different. You can't just erase her, she added softly. The words lingered in the air between them, heavy with meaning. She wasn't just talking about her mother anymore. She was talking about herself. About how they had erased people like her for years without even knowing it. Without even caring. But maybe, just maybe, today would be different. The truth would come out. It had to. The grand chandelier above Maya flickered, casting long shadows over the polished marble floors. The soft hum of voices in the hallway was drowned out by the silence of the CEO's office. Outside, the sprawling estate stretched far beyond the gates, its stone walls a silent testament to wealth, power, and an indifference Maya couldn't ignore. She had been here before as a cleaner, a faceless part of the machine. She remembered the way the owners of the company would pass by, never noticing her, never even glancing down as she swept the floors. They walked with such ease, like the world belonged to them. She could hear their laughter now, faint and muffled from behind the closed doors, the sound of business deals being made, lives being changed, all over a polished mahogany table. They didn't care. About the ones who worked to keep this place running. To them, she was nothing more than a background figure, a shadow in their bright world. Their clothes were always pristine. Pressed suits, silk ties, the sharp scent of cologne that seemed to stick to the air long after they left. And they never saw her. She was invisible. Maya knew what it was like to be invisible. She'd learned it as a child, back when she would watch the world spin around her. Her mother struggling to keep food on the table, to pay bills that never seemed to stop stacking up. The world didn't care about her mother either. Not until she'd helped build it from the ground up. Yet, all these years later, no one remembered. No one acknowledged the work that had gone into this success. No one remembered that her mother was once a driving force here. She shifted, uneasy on the cold tile, feeling every inch of the divide between her and the CEO sitting across from her. His fingers drummed lightly on the desk, the slight sound a reminder of how comfortable he was, how much power he held over everything, including her. His eyes flicked up to meet hers, but it wasn't the gaze of someone who saw her. It was the gaze of someone who tolerated her. "You should be careful where you're standing," he said softly, almost dismissive. His voice had a cool edge to it, like he was speaking to someone below his level. "You might ruin the view." Maya swallowed, her hands clenched by her sides. His words, although polite, dripped with the kind of condescension that made her feel like an outsider in this world she could never truly belong to. His world. The world of luxury cars, polished floors, and the illusion of effortless success. To him, she was just another worker, just another cog in the machine, replaceable. But she wasn't going to back down. Not today. Not when the truth was finally within reach. She straightened, the weight of the truth heavy on her chest, but her resolve clear. "I'm not here to ruin anything," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here to make sure my mother's legacy isn't forgotten." Maya's breath caught as the CEO's dismissive gaze lingered. The moment stretched, heavy with tension. She knew, deep down, that speaking up now could cost her everything. This wasn't just a job to her. It was the only thing holding her life together. The same job that had kept her afloat for so many years, despite the constant struggle. But as his fingers drummed on the desk, something in her snapped. Her mother's legacy, her own dignity, all those years spent in silence. She couldn't bear it anymore. She took a step forward. The sound of her heels against the cold floor was a sharp contrast to the thick silence that filled the room. The CEO's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. The air between them thickened, and Maya could feel every inch of the divide between them. His world of wealth and power was a fortress. Her world of struggle and survival was an invisible, fragile thread. But today, she wasn't going to be invisible. "Maya," the CEO's voice was cold, almost amused. "I told you you're in the wrong room. I'm sure you have more important things to do than—" "I'm not leaving," Maya interrupted, her voice sharper than she intended, but steady. Her pulse raced in her neck. "This is my mother's company. She built it with her hands. She deserves to be acknowledged. You don't get to erase her. Not today." The CEO's lips tightened into a thin line. The room felt smaller now, the air crackling with unease. Maya's heart hammered in her chest, but she held her ground. She wasn't going to back down. "I don't know who you think you are," the CEO muttered, his tone cutting through the air like a blade. "But you don't speak to me like that. I could have you removed from here in an instant." Maya felt her stomach tighten. The weight of his words hit her hard, but she stood tall. He was right. He could have her removed, could fire her in an instant, and she would be just another nameless face who would never be remembered. But today, she wasn't going to be silent. Not anymore. "I don't care," she said, her voice quieter now, but no less determined. "I'm not leaving until you listen. You think I don't know how this works? I've been cleaning these floors for years, watching people like you walk past me like I don't exist. Watching you all pretend that everything was built by people who didn't have to work twice as hard, while the rest of us stay invisible." She took a breath, her hands trembling at her sides. "I was invisible to you, but my mother wasn't. She made sure you all could sit at this table, while she was never invited to the seat beside you. She worked for this company, built it from nothing. You think I'm just a janitor? That's what you see when you look at me. isn't it? Her voice wavered, but she kept her eyes locked on his. You'll never get it, the CEO sneered, standing up from behind his desk. His towering figure cast a shadow over her, and Maya felt a chill run through her. He was taller, more powerful, but she didn't flinch. I understand perfectly, she said, her words slow and deliberate. I understand what it means to be treated like I'm nothing. But what you don't get is that I'm not here for a paycheck anymore. I'm here because my mother deserves recognition. You've hidden her name long enough. There was a long pause, filled only by the faint hum of the air conditioning, the sound of her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, she thought he might throw her out, might call security, might fire her and end her career here. But instead, his eyes flicked to the photo on the desk, the one of her mother. The slight shift in his posture told Maya everything she needed to know. He knew. I don't need to be reminded of her, the CEO said, his voice low and dangerous. You'll regret this. Maya stood frozen, the weight of his words pressing down on her. But she didn't budge. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the moment that would decide everything. Could destroy her, sure, but it could also change everything. And she wasn't going to back down now. With a final glance at the CEO, she turned on her heel, her shoes clicking sharply on the floor, her breath coming in short bursts. The silence that followed her departure felt heavy, but Maya knew something had shifted. She had stood up. She had been seen. And the world was about to change. For better or worse. Maya's heart slammed against her ribs, the coldness of the marble floor creeping up through her shoes as she stood there, her breath shallow, every nerve in her body tingling. The CEO's words, sharp as knives, stung like ice. You think you can just waltz in here, act like you're somebody, and demand respect. His voice echoed through the room, colder than the air. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating her as he leaned forward, eyes narrowing with disdain. You're nothing but a cleaner. You should know your place. She flinched, the words digging into her skin like thorns. But she didn't move, didn't flinch. Maya swallowed hard, trying to steady her pulse, to stop her hands from shaking. But the truth was, the weight of his words was already sinking in. She had crossed a line, one she knew she could never uncross. And there was no turning back now. The CEO's eyes bore into her, his mouth curled in a cruel, thin smile. I think you've forgotten who's in charge here. He stood up, towering over her, his presence filling the room, making her feel smaller with each passing second. She could almost feel the heat of his anger pressing against her skin, the tension so thick it made her want to scream, to run, to break. But she held her ground. She couldn't run anymore. Maybe I should have you escorted out. You're making a scene, he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Maya's heart was pounding in her chest, a dull roar filling her ears. She could hear her breath catching in her throat, but she kept her mouth shut. She couldn't let him see how much he was hurting her. That would be the end. She couldn't let him see the tears welling in her eyes, the ones she'd kept hidden for so long. They were useless now. All the anger, all the pain, all the humiliation. It was boiling up inside her, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing it. I don't belong here, do I? She whispered, almost to herself. I'm not supposed to be in this room. Not supposed to stand here, in front of you. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. She wasn't going to give him that either. But I'm still here, and I'm still going to tell you the truth. The CEO's expression darkened, his lips curling into a sneer. You don't get to lecture me, he snapped, his hands slamming down onto the desk. You don't get to speak to me like that, you little... The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. But before he could finish, Maya took a step forward. Her chest ached with the weight of everything she was holding inside. Everything she had been holding back for so long. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising, more confident now, her breath coming faster. You don't get it. My mother, she built this company. You wouldn't even have this office if it weren't for her. And you? She swallowed hard, the bitterness rising in her throat. You don't even remember her name. You don't even know who she was. The CEO's eyes flashed with something dark, But it wasn't fear. It was fury. Pure, unfiltered anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he spat, his voice low and venomous. "Your mother was just another cog in the machine. She didn't do anything special. She wasn't anything to me, nothing but a worker. Just like you." The words hit her like a slap, harder than anything she had expected. Maya staggered back, her body swaying, as if the room had just tilted on its axis. Her legs felt weak beneath her, like she might collapse at any moment. But she held herself up, barely. "Don't you dare say that about her," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't get to belittle her. Not after everything she did. You don't even know her. You don't know what she sacrificed." The CEO's face twisted into something worse than anger, disdain. He laughed. It was a low, bitter sound, one that scraped across Maya's skin like sandpaper. "Sacrifice." He took a step toward her, his presence closing in, suffocating her. "She didn't sacrifice anything. She worked because she had to. She was nothing but a servant, just like you." Maya's eyes burned with the sting of his words, but she refused to let him see her weakness. She wouldn't break. Not now. The silence in the room grew heavier, suffocating, as the CEO's words hung in the air like smoke. He stood there, waiting for her to crack, to crumble under the weight of his contempt. But she didn't. Maya could feel her stomach twisting, her hands trembling at her sides, but she didn't move. She didn't speak. She just stood there, her gaze locked on his, and for the first time, she felt the power shift. For just a moment, the balance tilted in her favor. "You don't have the right to say her name," Maya said, her voice quiet, but with a steel edge to it. "Not after everything she did. She was more than you'll ever be." The CEO's eyes flashed, his jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Instead, he stood there, seething, staring at her, as if trying to decide whether to shout, to strike her down, to tell her to leave. He could end her here, right now, but he didn't. "Get out," he finally said, his voice cold, clipped. "Before I have you thrown out." Maya didn't move. Her heart was still racing in her chest, but the tension was different now. She had made her stand. She had said what needed to be said. She turned on her heel, walking slowly toward the door, the cold chill of the marble floor beneath her feet as she left the room behind. She didn't look back. But as the door swung shut behind her, she knew. She had finally said it. She had made her mark. And nothing would ever be the same. Maya stepped out of the CEO's office, her feet quiet against the cold marble floor. The weight of the confrontation still hung in the air around her, thick and suffocating. But now it was replaced by something else, a quiet stillness. She walked slowly, as though the room's tension had followed her, clinging to her skin, making every step feel heavier. The hallway stretched before her, silent. The walls lined with expensive art she didn't recognize, the distant sound of muffled voices slipping through the cracks. The air felt thick, as if the entire building was holding its breath, waiting for something. Outside, the sky was turning gray, the promise of rain hanging in the air. The soft patter of footsteps echoed behind her. Someone following, maybe security, maybe just the sound of her own heartbeat in the hollow corridor. Her breath caught in her throat, a sharp reminder of how alive she felt, how fragile. She passed the large windows, the sunlight barely making its way through the clouds, casting a pale, washed-out light over everything. It felt like the world was muted. No harsh edges, no glaring truths, just quiet. She stopped by the window, her palm pressed flat against the cool glass, her reflection blurred in the fog of the rain that had started to fall. Each drop left streaks across the surface, as if the world was weeping with her or for her. Maya closed her eyes, letting the steady rhythm of her breathing fill the silence. The soft thrum of the city outside felt distant, almost foreign, as though she was a part of a different world now. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, the lines of hard work etched into her skin, the quiet strength Maya had always admired. But now, even in the absence of her, there was a sense of something unfinished, something left unsaid. Maya thought of how long she had been invisible to everyone, how her mother had fought for recognition, only to be erased by time. She felt the pull of tears behind her eyelids, but she kept them at bay. She had to. The world would never stop moving, never stop pressing forward. And Maya couldn't afford to stop now. Not when she had come this far. Her thoughts drifted, as they often did when she was alone. She thought of the small apartment she called home, the smell of her mother's old cooking, the way she used to hum in the kitchen. Maya hadn't realized how much of her mother's presence she had taken for granted. It wasn't until today, standing in that cold office, facing a man who had never known her worth, that she understood what her mother had carried, what she had fought for, quietly, behind the scenes, her sacrifices never seen. The wind picked up outside, howling softly against the windows, and for a moment, Maya felt the weight of everything she had been holding on to. The responsibility, the anger, the longing to be seen. It was all there, like a storm in her chest, but the stillness around her, the quiet of the room, the soft tapping of rain against glass, somehow made it easier to breathe. In that moment, Maya realized something. She had spent so much of her life trying to be invisible, trying to survive in the shadows, that she had forgotten what it meant to be seen. To stand up and say, "I matter." And now, as the rain fell softly outside, she felt it for the first time, realizing that she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her mother, for the woman who had never gotten the chance to say what she had done, to show what she had given. Maya wasn't just walking away from that office. She was walking towards something bigger than herself, something she could never have imagined. The soft glow from the streetlights outside seemed to warm her face, and for a fleeting moment, Maya thought she could almost hear her mother's voice, gentle and reassuring, telling her it was going to be okay, that it was time to let go of the past and step into the light. With a slow, steady breath, Maya turned and walked away from the window, her steps softer now, as though the storm had passed and she was finally ready to move forward. Maya sat in the small, dimly lit employee lounge, her fingers tightly gripping the cup of coffee in front of her. The warmth did little to ease the coldness that had settled in her chest. Her mind was still swirling with the aftermath of the confrontation. Every word, every glance, replaying in her head like a haunting echo. She hadn't expected anything more than humiliation. But now, as she sat alone in the quiet, something unexpected shifted. The door creaked open. Maya looked up, startled to see Veronica Ellison, the hotel's general manager, standing in the doorway. She wasn't someone Maya ever expected to see here, in the quiet, forgotten corner of the building where the staff lingered. Veronica was someone who moved in different circles, someone who didn't step into the spaces where Maya worked, where her mother had worked. Veronica's eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was a weight between them. Something Maya couldn't name, but it made her heart beat just a little faster. She had only seen Veronica from a distance, a polished, composed figure who seemed to glide through the high society world of the hotel like she owned it all. But now, standing in the doorway, her expression was different. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, for Maya to finally see her as more than just a worker. "I know what you're thinking," Veronica said, her voice calm but firm, as though she had anticipated Maya's reaction. She stepped into the room, closing the door quietly behind her. "That you've been forgotten. That everything your mother worked for, everything you've done, was invisible." She paused, taking a slow breath. "But you're wrong." Maya didn't know what to say. Her pulse quickened, the steady rhythm of her heart now a jarring drumbeat in her ears. I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She had been seen finally, but not in the way she expected. It was something more. Veronica crossed the room, her heels clicking against the floor in sharp contrast to Maya's hesitant, careful steps. "I've seen the way you've been treated," she said, her gaze softening just for a moment. "I've seen the way they ignore you, the way they ignore your mother. But what you don't know is that your mother, she was more than just a part of this company. She was the reason this company is where it is today." Maya blinked, the words sinking in, slow and heavy. She opened her mouth to speak, but Veronica held up a hand, silencing her. You don't know everything, Maya. What happened after your mother died. How the company kept her legacy hidden. How they erased her name from the records. Veronica paused again, stepping closer, her presence now commanding. But I can tell you this. She wasn't just another employee. She was the one who saw what the future could be. Maya's mind raced, the room spinning around her. She had always known something was wrong, but hearing the words come from Veronica, someone who had the power to change everything, made it real. You knew? She asked, her voice barely audible. I knew, Veronica said simply, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. I knew what your mother had done, and I knew that when she passed, the world tried to pretend she was nothing. But I never forgot her. I never will. Veronica's gaze hardened, and for a brief moment, Maya saw something she hadn't expected. Rage, a quiet, simmering fury. You think they don't know who you are? Who your mother was? They knew. They've always known. The words hit Maya like a slap. Her breath caught in her throat as the realization settled in. Everything she'd fought for, everything she had suffered for, had been part of a system that had deliberately kept her mother's achievements hidden. Not just ignored them, but buried them. You don't have to fight anymore, Veronica said, her voice softer now. I'm here to make sure of that. Your mother's work. It's not over. And neither is yours. Maya's mind spun, her heart racing faster now. She could feel the shift, the change. The room felt different. The weight of her mother's hidden legacy, the weight of her own struggle, was being lifted. The power had shifted. Veronica, someone who had the authority, the power, was no longer an outsider to her cause. She was here to help, to expose the truth, to finally give Maya and her mother the recognition they deserved. For the first time in her life, Maya felt the weight of the world shift in her favor. Not because she had won, not because she had fought harder, but because someone had finally seen her. Seen her mother. Seen the truth. Maya opened her mouth to speak, but Veronica was already walking toward the door. We'll make this right, Maya. Together. And with that, the door clicked shut behind her. Maya stood there, her breath coming in slow, deliberate breaths, the weight of the moment sinking into her bones. She wasn't alone anymore. Not in the way she had always felt. The truth was finally coming to light. The power had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same. Maya stood at the window of the small office, watching the rain fall softly outside. The world outside the glass a blur of gray and muted color. The hum of the city seemed distant, as though everything had slowed to match her own stillness. The past few weeks had felt like a storm. Each day a whirlwind of emotions, of confrontation, of the truth finally clawing its way to the surface. She had expected to feel triumph, to feel the weight of victory, but instead, she felt peace. The door behind her creaked open, and she turned, instinctively. There, standing in the doorway, was the CEO. His usual confident, almost smug expression replaced by something softer, something almost vulnerable. His eyes were not filled with arrogance now, but with something different, something Maya hadn't expected. I owe you an apology, he said, his voice quieter than usual, not the booming authority that had once filled the room. It wasn't the kind of apology she had imagined, not grand or dramatic, but simple and real in its own way. I didn't see you. I didn't see your mother, and I was wrong. He took a step forward, his hands clasped in front of him, as if unsure of how to proceed. You fought for something that should have been recognized long ago. Maya's heart beat a little faster, but she didn't say anything. She simply stood there, her gaze steady, her posture still. She wasn't sure what she had expected in this moment, but it wasn't this quiet acknowledgement of her mother's worth, of her own struggle. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued, his voice carrying the weight of years of missed opportunity. I just want you to know that I see you now. Both of you. Your mother. You. Maya swallowed, the lump in her throat catching her off guard. She had imagined this moment countless times, fantasized about the apology, about the words that would make everything right. But now, hearing them, they didn't feel like a victory. They just felt like closure. The kind she had needed all along. Not the kind that came with revenge or anger, but the kind that came from simply being seen. "You don't have to do anything," she said softly, her voice steady but calm. "You don't have to fix anything." Her words were not dismissive, not cold. They were simply true. "I'm not here for that. I'm here because my mother deserves it." The CEO nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, something that Maya couldn't name, but it softened the edges of his usual distance. It was like he had finally taken a moment to see the people he had overlooked for so long, the ones who had always been right in front of him, working and building, and fighting in the shadows of his world. He took another step toward her, his voice quieter now, more personal. "I will make sure her name is known," he said, his eyes not leaving hers. "Not just for you, but for everyone who never got the recognition they deserved." Maya nodded, not needing to say anything more. She could feel the weight of the moment, the significance of it, even if it wasn't dramatic, even if it wasn't a grand gesture. It was real, and for once that was enough. There was a long pause between them, the silence comfortable, not awkward. In that quiet, Maya felt something shift, something subtle but undeniable. The power had changed hands, not through anger or force, but through understanding, through a shared acknowledgement of what had been wrong and what was now being made right. The CEO turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I hope you'll find peace with this," he said, his voice softer now, almost as if speaking to himself. Maya looked out the window, the rain slowing to a gentle drizzle, the sky beginning to lighten, just slightly. "I think I already have," she replied, her voice a whisper, but strong with everything she had carried to get here. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of the past lift, not because she had taken something from him, but because she had let it go. Her mother's legacy, her own place in this world. Finally, they were where they needed to be. Maya stood by the window, watching the last remnants of rain fade into a quiet, hazy evening. The soft light of the street lamps outside flickered, casting long shadows across the room. The office felt empty now. Empty not in the way it had before, when it had been filled with cold tension, but in a different way, as if something had been finally put to rest. The sound of distant footsteps echoed in the hallway, faint and almost inaudible, but Maya didn't move. She stayed there, her hand resting gently on the glass, her breath soft against the cool surface. The world outside was still, frozen in that moment of transition, like the space between breaths. Her reflection in the window blurred, mingling with the light. For the first time in a long while, she felt unseen in the best way. The door behind her clicked softly shut. The hum of the building faded, leaving only the quiet pulse of her own heartbeat, steady and sure. And outside, the sky began to clear, the first stars beginning to pierce the dark. Slowly, she turned away, her steps light, her face unreadable, but her eyes held something new. Without a word, she walked out into the night, the silence wrapping around her like a soft blanket.